I believe we're ready to go. Good morning and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Jocelyn Chandler, Stephen Lewis, Terrence Otto, and Martin Vervoort. My name is Fabian Poulin. I will be chairing this meeting today. The procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition of each of the applications. Today, we'll hear oral submissions from any interested parties. Notice regarding minor variance application, notwithstanding pre-consultation with city staff, is the responsibility of the applicant to identify all required variances accurately on the application to 1, add a new variance or increase extent of variance requested. Must be given in accordance with the Planning Act and may require the application to be recirculated for the next hearing date at a cost to the applicant at the prescribed fee. If an applicant amends their plans with no impact to the variances or to reduce the variances requested, recirculation may not be required. As part of the statutory notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, I may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. Can the coordinator confirm if we have received all statutory declarations?
Mr. Chair, we have received one statutory declaration for item number 6, David Manchester. All other items will need the oath read.
Thank you very much. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application followed by questions from members and submissions. Sorry about that. Submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name, spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. Finally, before we begin, we have just one item to address today. Does any member need to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today or that are on the agenda of another committee panel? I believe Ms. Chandler has a conflict.
Declaration of interest for number item 15 and 16 on this panel. That's B00320 and A00287.
Thank you very much. So for Madam Coordinator, we'll deal with those 2 items at the end of our meeting after item number 17. And we will now hear the application scheduled for this hearing. We'll deal firstly with any items that may be adjourned. I believe we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 requests for adjournment. We'll start with item number 4. Item number 4, 2, 3, 4 is having to do with 6341 Nick Adams Road. Michelle Perry is the agent on file. Michelle, are you available? Michelle Perry, are you available? I see a phone in. I'm not sure whether that's the person.
Mr. Chair, I believe it's the applicant, not Ms. Perry coming today.
All right. James Reyna, are you available, Ms.?
Yes, I am available. I'm on the telephone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyna. Now, the application has been requested to be adjourned today by the planning department. Are you in agreement with that adjournment, sir?
Yes, I am, and I will comply with the request.
Great. So the application is requested to be adjourned sine die. I will ask the panel if they approve to have this application put over sine die. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application has been adjourned, sir, sine die.
Okay, I also wish to note that I do appreciate the assistance of Sean Harrigan and the Planning Committee, and all the assistance that they have provided me. Thank you very much.
That's nice to hear. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, now move on to application number 5. Application number 5 is having to do with 3251 Haddon Road. And the agent on file is Kiana Simmons. Ms. Simmons, are you available? I see that you're there. No, you're gone. There you are. Okay, perfect. I see you now. Ms. Simmons, are you in agreement with the Conservation Authority's request for adjournment?
Yes, we are, and we would ask that we be added to the agenda of the next hearing, and we'll prepare a plan noting where the septic system is for the Conservation Authority before then.
Okay, so the next meeting is November the 17th. All panel members, all those in favor of adjourning this application to November 17th, please raise your hands. Yes, you will be, this application is put over to November 17th. Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
Thanks.
All right. The next adjournment request is item number 6, having to do with 874 David Manchester Road. Leila Alware, are you available? I see a Mr. Mazin or a Mazin has got his hand up. I don't see what's Ms. Ware. Mr. Mazin, are you to speak to this? Mr. Mazin is muted. Good morning, Mazin. You are muted, sir. Could you unmute your? Still unmute, still mute. You're still muted, sir. There we go. I hear something, almost. Still muted, sir. Should roll your, just roll your cursor across your screen, sir, and you should be able to find something that will help unmute you. I can see your video, sir, but I cannot hear you. So if you roll across your screen, sir, just at the bottom left of the screen, there would be an icon that shows mute, or it's a microphone icon. You're still muted, sir. Yeah, you can call in. So we'll put this off till the end. I'll call on you in just a moment, sir. Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 7. Item number 7 has to do with 5030 McNeely Road. Julie Perkins is the agent on file. Ms. Perkins, are you available? I see you're there, Ms. Perkins. You are muted and there's no video of you at the time. I see you're unmuted. Good morning, Ms. Perkins.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
I understand that PED, the Planning Department, would like to adjourn this application. Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, there's a request for adjournment from city staff. I received a copy of the city planner's report late yesterday with their conditions and new requirements.
So are you prepared to have this application adjourned today?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, may I ask a few questions?
Absolutely. We'll have the planning department come on and give their justification if you like.
Well, just a couple of questions, if I may.
Sure.
Condition number 2 states the services will be connected to the city infrastructure. These are private wells and septic systems. Can the condition be amended to this change? And also,
we're not going to get into we're just not going to get into the substance of the application at this time.
Okay.
What we'd like to do is just determine whether you'd like to proceed today or you'd like to go ahead with the adjournment as the.
So one more clarification, if I may, then on number 8 for the EIS requirement, which is part of the new requirements that have been identified for the reason for the adjournment from the city staff. I just need clarification on what the EIS requirement is, because I read the EIS guidelines online, and are 4 types of EISs. There's an EIS, 1, there's an EIS decision tool, 2, there's an EIS form, 3, there's a scope EIS form, and 4, there's a detailed EIS report. So may I ask for clarification on this EIS requirement?
Yes, I think you'll be able to do that with Mr. Gordon. The whole purpose of my question, this question today is right now is whether we're going to adjourn this application today to another date or not. But this information is really necessary for us to be able to make a decision today. So Mr. Gordon, can you jump on here and give us your reasons for the request for adjournment?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The reason for requesting the adjournment is that we've not received an EIS in support of this application, and the need for an EIS is to do with city mapping that shows this as significant woodlands. As well, part of the reason for not being comfortable with accepting an EIS as a condition is that the lot lines are either close to or crossing a small creek, and depending on the findings of the EIS, the lot lines of the proposed lots may need to be adjusted slightly. So if it went ahead today and were granted as proposed, that may cause an issue for the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Perkins.
Yeah.
Again, are you in agreement with having this application adjourned? You'll need to fulfill the, okay. So you're welcome. When do you think you'll be able to get those reports to the planning department? That'll all depend on when we can adjourn this application to.
Yes, so this is part of the clarification that I need that I mentioned earlier. So once I have a better understanding as to which EIS type is required, then I can proceed from there.
Okay. So my suggestion would be to adjourn this sine die for the time being until you get enough information from Mr. Gordon that satisfies your need, and then we can move forward with your application. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to adjourn this application sine die. All those in favor, panel members, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned. Thank you very much, Ms. Perkins.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, now on to application number 10. This application has to do with 7110 Gallagher Road. Mr. Brooks, are you available? Mr. Brooks. There we see. I see Mr. Brooks is here. You're muted still, sir.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Brooks.
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you in agreement with Planning Department's request for adjournment?
I would like to make a comment first, very similar to the one that you've just had on. I got the concerns, the conditions, late at 3:35 on Monday, and I couldn't contact the author of the environmental impact study until late Tuesday, but I did have another biologist take a look at the report and the comments. All of these comments that is in the report sent to me could have been handled in a day or 2 days. The adjustments that is being recommended by the planner simply are administrative. It's easy to do, but I simply didn't have time from Tuesday to this morning to actually have them done. But I've talked to both biologists, and they think they can have them done within a week or a week and a half at the most.
Okay. Would you like to have this application adjourned to the next meeting, November 17th, sir?
It has to be, because I have to submit the adjustments being recommended by the planner.
Okay. So, yes, Ms. Chandler.
I think we'll need to go 2 meetings down because they're going to need an opportunity to review that EIS. So if it's completed in a week and a half, that's not enough time to circulate it to the people who need to review it.
Mr. Brooks?
Actually, looking at the comments, the main comments are adjusting the lines away from the provincially significant wetlands. And that simply just means redrawing the lot lines. All the other concerns are really in the wording. And if the planner were available, Sean, he could comment on that.
Okay, Mr. Gordon. Sorry, Mr. Harrigan, are you able to comment on your request to have this adjourned?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department is requesting an adjournment primarily because the lot lines are either bisecting provincially significant wetlands or within the required 30.
You're frozen, Mr. Harrigan.
Sorry, I cut out there for a moment.
Yes, you did. You
Okay.
stopped where you were talking about the 30 meters from the significant wetland.
Yes, thank you. So the lot lines as they are right now identified in the environmental impact statement are going through provincially significant wetlands, and those do need to be updated. There are a number of other significant concerns that would need to be addressed. However, if Mr. Brooks has shared these comments with his environmental planner and the consultants, and they are satisfied that they can complete the requested work within a week or two, we would be in agreement to do an adjournment perhaps till December 9th, which I believe is 2 hearing dates. We would not have enough time to review a revised environmental impact statement if it was to be completed in a week or so for the November 17th. It simply wouldn't leave enough time to review the entirety of the report again to make sure that all comments have been addressed, and for me to prepare a planning report as well too.
Okay. So, Mr. Brooks, planning part needs more time.
All right. May I comment on that? Just as a comment and observation, the EIS was really in the hands of the city on September the 22nd, and the mapping we're using is Geo Ottawa, and we purposely put the lots outside that provincially significant wetland, and really to satisfy the concerns of the city, we can move those lot lines further away If they want 30 meters, we can give them 60 meters. That's really only a movement of your rear lot line. The other issues, for example, item number 14 is moving. I know, Mr. Chairman, you want to interrupt, but just here's an example. Moving any animals from the east to the west, that really doesn't require a study or a biologist. That's just common sense. I don't know if the animals will understand the signs or not to go westward rather than eastward, but nevertheless, much of this is the language and wordsmithing. And I thought in the EIS that was presented that the building envelope was clearly shown. And I know Mr. Harrigan is looking for lot sizes and the data that goes with it. That was submitted in the severance application. And I believe the environmental impact study and the application should be read together. So we can wordsmith this in a week, and it shouldn't really take to look down through 14 points because some of those points are overlapped. We've already put in motion sending some of this off to the Ministry of Natural Resources for that extra 30 meters. I mean, it should not take from September the 22nd to November the 1st, late in the afternoon, to actually receive the comments. My recommendation is that when applications are given to the planning committee, one person, I've now dealt with nearly 6 different people on this application. It should be one planner, starts it, ends it. And we should have those conditions in our hands 5 working days before this hearing. Had I had that, we could proceed today with this hearing because really the principal issue is with the lot lines, and we will give extra separation distance from that wetland. There's no problem. We got 61 acres to play with here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brooks. I guess the question really comes down to, do we have enough time to review the information that Mr. Brooks will be providing? Ms. Chandler, you don't believe that's time is enough time to be able to do that for the 17th?
No, I mean, 2 weeks is, you get a week in and the planning department is overrun. I'm aware of that right now. I don't think it's possible for them to do, and I don't think we need yet another adjournment on this application.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any comments?
No, I think it makes sense to put it over to our first meeting in December, which I think is the 1st. And as far as Mr. Brooks's comments regarding the planning department, that's nothing we have control over, and he should speak to his counselor if he has concerns about that.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments?
I agree. We should put it over to the first meeting in December.
Okay, Mr. Lewis?
Don't want to have to go through this again in 2 weeks. Let's go to December.
Okay. So all those in favor of panel members of adjourning this application to December the 1st, first meeting in December, please raise your hands. Your application,
Mr. Chair,
Brooks?
the December
Yes.
meeting is December 8th. There's
That
no
would
meeting
be
scheduled first.
Okay, so it will be December the 8th then. So we will move to adjourn this application to December the 8th. Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you.
We have 2 more adjournment requests, items number 13 and 14. And I believe they're dealing with the same planner on this. So item number 13 is having to do with 2066 Stagecoach Road. Taylor West is the agent on file. Mr. West, are you available? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Mr. West, are you in agreement with the planning's request to have an adjournment to this application?
Yes, we're in agreement with an adjournment. We just simply want to allow more time for our client to speak with the abutting owner at 2078 Stagecoach.
November the 17th works for you?
That's fine with us. Thank you.
Okay. And that's the same for application number 14, which is 2078 Stagecoach Road, same issue?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'd like to ask the panel if
Mr.
they
Chair, if I
would.
may.
Sure, Mr. Gordon.
Planning, just for the record, planning did not request the adjournment.
Okay, thank you. The applicant requested the adjournment. Thank you. So on, therefore, I'm asking the panel if they would adjourn this application to November the 17th, both applications number 13 and 14. If you're in agreement, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned, Mr. West, numbers 13 and 14. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that ends the adjournment requests. Now we'll move to the top of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, we do need to jump back to item number 6.
Oh, thank you very much.
The applicant on the telephone now.
Perfect. Mr. Mazin, are you available?
Yes.
Please mute. Good morning, Mr. Mazin. Glad we're able to talk.
Good morning. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's technology.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the planning department has requested an adjournment to this file. Are you in agreement with that adjournment request?
No, I want to keep going today.
You'd like to keep going today? Okay, I'd like to ask Mr. Harrigan to jump in here and describe his request for adjournment.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I will provide a little bit of background detail on this application as well to help clarify why we're requesting this adjournment. So this application was originally heard last year and subsequently lapsed just because of issues with getting the development agreement registered on title and some issues with resolving the hydrogeological study and some of the resolutions for that now. The applicant has since reapplied, which is in front of us today here, and they have submitted the hydrogeological study in advance because they had prepared it for their last application, and the noise study as well too. The planning department has reviewed those, as we do with all new applications. We do a complete comprehensive review of all applications. The noise study, we have discovered there was some additional information that the original reviewer had missed, and because of that one, we do need a revised noise study as per our senior engineer, just to demonstrate that there is an appropriate building location right beside the provincial highway. The second issue is in regards to the hydrogeological study. Now, this property, back 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the main dwelling had originally burnt down through some accident and was subsequently rebuilt. Now, during the rebuilding stage, they were looking to, or just shortly after, they were looking to sever the two lots. Now, the hydrogeological study, according to our hydrogeologist, they couldn't evaluate the well that was on the property just because it wasn't safe to do so due to the debris and the issues surrounding the burnt down house. So they used the neighbor's lot across from there. However, they were only permitted to do a sample for quality, not quantity. So the quality came back okay, but the pump test that was required wasn't done. So they did find a way to use the existing well on the retained lot to test it. They went in and tested the pump test, and the pump was okay, but the quality was really not okay, especially for chloride levels. They were well above the council guidelines of what is permitted. So they were instructed that a new well would have to be installed on the property and tested. They went and installed the new well on the severed lot and did a test for both the quality and quantity, and that came back okay. The primary concern and why we're looking for an adjournment is the severance application isn't just about creating one lot. It is creating two new lots where there only used to be one. And the hydrogeological, under our current guidelines, has to demonstrate that both lots being created are appropriate. And now, based on the hydrogeological report that we have, the retained lots well is not appropriate for development. So we're seeking an adjournment to have a new hydrogeological report completed. Primarily, we would like to see it done before this application moves forward to avoid a scenario where this application can lapse again. because it will more than likely require a new well drilled on the retained lot. That is primarily the only way that a satisfactory hydrogeological report can be completed. So having this done in advance will ensure that this application won't lapse in the future.
Thanks, Mr. Harrigan. I'd like to ask the panels for their comments. Mr. Lewis?
Well, quite often we do severances and the well has to be drilled. The hydrogeological study is done after they're approved. So what's the difference here? If we approve this, then that's one step out of the way. The applicant has to drill as well on his new lot then before it can be stamped. I don't see a problem going ahead with that.
Okay. Mr. Otto, any comments?
Similar thoughts, but it seems to me that they've already drilled one well there and it hasn't been satisfactory. So I'm up in the air on that one.
Okay. Mr. Vervoort?
I think we want to be satisfied that there are no water issues before we go ahead and create the law. Like, I don't think it's going to be a lot of work, but it makes more sense, I think, to have that information so we can make a proper determination. So I'd be in favor of adjourning it.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler?
I agree with Mr. Vervoort.
Thank you. Mr. Mazin, you've heard the different panel members and the city. Are you still, Adam, you still like to go forward today?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, what happened is when we tested our neighbors well, because of COVID, I couldn't go back and ask them for the pump test. I asked them for a water sample and they gave it to us. They came back to me and they said they wanted the pump test done. I said, okay, I have a well on my property. It hasn't been used for 2 years. I could use that and we could see the water quality. The water quality came back. It wasn't good for the city. So they told me to go dig a well where I'm going to sever the property. So I went and did that and I dug a well. I severed and they tested and they did the pump test. Everything came back good. They passed it. Then they came back to me and they said, we need a 30 centimeter reserve. I said, how can you do a 30 centimeter reserve on an existing dwelling? I have a house there. They told me then there's two things that I could do. Either drill a new well where the house is or put it on the title that a new well needs to be drilled. I said, okay, I'll put it on the title. On Monday, they come to me with these comments that you have to adjourn due to these facts. I said, but it already been passed. Everything passed. The noise study passed and it was going to be sent to legal, but legal told us, or the planner told us, that to get all the conditions done so we could send it to legal. So now they're coming back with all these different comments and things that I have to do. But the well has been passed.
Mr. Harrigan?
And
sorry, go ahead, Mr. Mazin.
Yeah, and that's the issue that I have. I went with every point that the city told me to do. They told me go dig a well on the Severn property. They did not tell me dig a well where the house is. I would have dug the well where the house is and proved to them that I have sufficient good quality water. They told me to go dig it on the 7th property.
So, Mr. Mazin, if I can just interrupt for a second, we're dealing just with the adjournment today. If you'd like to go forward with this application, it's at your risk. Without the information, I think a couple of panel members have already suggested that they would like to see an adjournment. But if you'd like to proceed, I'm sure we could go ahead. Mr. Lewis would like to make a comment?
Just one question. Can we go ahead with the lot, sever the one lot that has the okay well test?
Mr. Harrigan?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's unfortunately not possible because the new well that was installed is on the separate lot. But as I mentioned again, it's not just about a severance. It's the application in front of us is to create two lots where there only was one. So both lots have to demonstrate they can be adequately and safely serviced on private services. And right now, the severed lot has demonstrated that with a few tweaks that need to be made through the revisions, but the retained lot, that needs to be demonstrated. And really at this point, the only way is to have a new well drilled. There's no way to, as as the applicant stated, we can't do a 30-centimeter reserve because the house is already there. There's really not much else we can do other than having a new well drilled. And at this point, because this application has already lapsed due to concerns with getting resolved in the hydrogeological, we would strongly recommend doing an adjournment so that it gets done first.
So I think that's the recommendation that we need to consider, Mr. Mazin. So it's either move forward today. You either move forward today, Mr. Mazin, just a moment. We either move forward today and hear your application and you run the risk of having it denied, or you have it adjourned until a later date where you have the information provided to planning so that and the application can proceed. I leave it in your court. We can.
Okay, and how much time do I need? Because if you guys want me to go dig a well, it's gonna take a while. Like.
Yeah, it probably will. So we can adjourn this application to 1st of next year if you'd like, and you'd have to, or we can do it sine die, where you can have some time to be able to get that done, and then come back to us and we can get a date for this application to be heard. Would you like to adjourn this application sine die?
Yes.
Sine die?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the applicant would like to adjourn this application sine die. All those in favor, panel members, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned sine die, Mr. Mazin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'd like to move on to application number 1. This is having to do with 4712 Beckwith Boundary Road. Derek Stopples is the agent on file. Mr. Stopples, are you available? I see your name. And there you are. You're muted, sir.
Are we good now?
Yep, we are good now. Mr.
Okay,
Stopples, I need to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on your property.
All right.
Are you available to take that oath today?
Yep.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I do.
Please proceed with a brief explanation of your application today, sir.
Okay. So I'm looking to subdivide our property into 2 separate parcels in order to create one new lot for future residential development. I understand we're creating 2 new lots though in total. If you will notice, I don't know if there's a presentation. Oh, here it comes. Okay, so if you'll notice, part 1 is the lot we wish to sever on the right-hand side of the screen, which is 74.18 meters frontage by 75.8 meters depth, and we'll retain the remainder, which is part 2 in the drawing, which contains the dwelling in which we reside. The drawing was submitted as part of our application. There's 2 farms. So on the next slide, just some comments about our severance. There's 2 farms, both of which are raising livestock within 1 kilometer of the proposed severance property, excuse me, for which we've completed the minimum distance separation forms and included in our application. Our environmental impact survey was completed by Heather Lunn as provided in our application. I'm aware that there are some conditions being requested for the application. To which we concur and we will comply with all those conditions. I've looked through the comments that the Committee of Adjustment has sent to me, and I feel like I've got a pretty good understanding. Do you want me to address those comments or?
No, you don't need to address those comments.
Okay, and we got a comment. We got a comment sent to us from Ms. Manette by from Hydro Ottawa. They said that this property is not their jurisdiction, but we are on the City of Ottawa side of Beckwith Boundary Road, and so we pay our hydro bills to the City of Ottawa. So it would in fact be their jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, it's that's your application. That's perfect. Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask Mr. Harrigan if he has any comments on behalf of the Planning Department.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department has no concerns with this application, subject to our conditions within the report.
And I believe the applicant has agreed to all conditions. There are 8 of them. Is that correct, Mr. Stopples?
That's correct, yeah.
Perfect. Any comments from our panel, Ms. Chandler?
No, I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort?
No, I'm fine. Everything appears to be in order. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Otto?
Looks good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
I support the application too. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Stopples. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks so much. And I'd also like to second the compliment or statement from earlier that Sean Harrigan's been a huge help, as well as everybody else that I've been in contact with at the City of Ottawa. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mr. Stopples. That's really appreciated. Thank you. On to application number 2, having to do with 1557 John Quinn Road. Taylor West, are you available?
Good morning again, Mr. Chair.
Good morning again, Mr. West. I have an oath to satisfy the declaration for the sign posting. Can you take that oath today?
Yes, I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I swear.
Please proceed with a brief description of your application, sir.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the coordinator to start the presentation. Excellent. Thank you. So the applications that are in front of you this morning are 2 severance applications on the property municipally known as 1557 John Quinn Road. For context, the subject property is shown on the image in front of you. It's east of the village of Greeley and north of the village of Metcalfe, which you can just see as the yellow on the bottom of your screen. It's the village of Metcalfe. The area of the subject property is characterized by both agricultural lots and rural residential lots. You can see, just directly south of the subject property, there's a rural estate subdivision. With respect to John Quinn Road, it's located between Bank Street and 8th Line Road. Let's switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the slide in front of you shows a more zoomed in version and shows the entirety of the parcel. It's located in the Osgood ward of the City of Ottawa. As you can see, it's on the east side of John Quinn Road. The subject property is an area of approximately 20.8 hectares and approximately 204 meters of frontage on John Quinn Road. The subject property is occupied by a detached dwelling with direct vehicular access to John Quinn Road. It's a little hard to see, but you can see it just on the leftmost side of the parcel. There's an accessory structure located towards the center of the property. This accessory structure is a coverall shed that is full of agricultural related tools and machinery. And this accessory structure will be located on the retained land. Fast to switch to the next slide, please. So the image in front of you shows the first severance application, and it severs off part 1, which is shown in orange on the figure in front of you. Part 1 will have a total area of approximately 1.4 hectares, a depth of 210 meters, and a frontage of 67 meters on John Quinn Road. This lot fully complies to the requirements of the zoning bylaw and contains the existing detached dwelling. Switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. Part 2 is shown in orange on the figure in front of you. This is for the second severance application. Part 2 will have a total area of approximately 1.8 hectares, a depth of 210 meters, and a frontage of 86 meters on John Quinn. This lot will also fully comply to the requirements of the zoning bylaw for the rural countryside zone. An easement is proposed over part 2 in favor of the retained parcel. We'll zoom up on it in a minute, but the purpose of the easement is to bring power to the coverall accessory building on the retained lot. The retained lot will have a total area of approximately 19.1 hectares, a depth of 1,028 meters, and a frontage of 51 meters on John Quinn. Similar to the other two lots, the retained lot will fully comply to the requirements of the zoning bylaw. If you ask to switch to the next slide, please. Perfect. So the slide in front of you is a zoomed in version of the previous slide. The 6 meter wide easement for the hydro power line is shown in the bottom left side of your screen. This easement extends down the power line to the coverall structure. This slide also highlights the existing detached dwelling that will be located on part 1 and the proposed detached dwelling. It should be worth noting that this proposed detached dwelling, as shown on the image in front of you, is actually already under construction. I'll just speak quickly to the requirements of the Planning Act with respect to severances. The proposal does not necessitate the construction of new public infrastructure, including roads and services. A plan of subdivision is not required. The proposed development has regard for the following matters of provincial interest: the protection of ecological systems and the conservation and management of natural resources. The existing detached dwelling on part 1 has private well and septic services, and there is an adequate supply of land on part 2 and the retained land to ensure the spacing requirements for the provision of private services. The proposed severance conforms to the policies of the City of Ottawa official plan, and the severed and retained lots conform to the lot area and lot width requirements of the rural countryside zone. As such, it's suitable for the purposes for which it is to be subdivided. The proposed severances result in lots that fully comply with the rural countryside zone. As such, the dimensions and shape of the proposed lots are suitable. And with respect to schools, the subject property will have access to schools in Metcalfe and Greeley. If I ask the coordinator to switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So there's been some discussion on the coverall structure that will be located on the retained land. The coverall structure is currently an accessory structure for the existing detached dwelling on the subject property. And as I've mentioned, the first severance application will sever the existing detached dwelling away from the coverall. And as such, this means that the coverall will have no principal use associated with a very short period of time. The proposed dwelling that was shown on the previous slide is actually, as I said, under construction. The foundation has been poured. Our client is actively pursuing a building permit for this detached dwelling, which we have learned that it will not be issued until the severance is finalized. Simply put, the building permit for the detached dwelling on the retained lot is just waiting for the severance application to be finalized. The second a building permit is issued, this quote unquote problem will resolve itself automatically. The coverall inside the coverall building contains agricultural related tools, which could be used for agricultural related purposes. Agricultural related uses are a permitted principal use in the rural countryside, as shown on the image in front of you, which outlines the uses permitted. The definition of agricultural related uses is also shown on the slide in front of you. And I quote that agricultural related uses involve, quote, non-accessory storage of farm products and farm related machinery. I would also note that the agricultural related uses include uses that are compatible with local farms, meaning the subject property does not necessarily need to be presently farmed. Simply put, the coverall can be used as both an accessory to a detached dwelling and a standalone agricultural related use. And the following slide will show an image of the interior of the coverall. Switch to the next slide. Thank you. So the slide in front of you shows a tractor within the coverall. As you may be aware, tractors can be used for agricultural related uses. Other content within the coverall includes shovels, rakes, trimmers, any lawn mowing equipment, wheelbarrow, hose, any other tools that could be related to farm use. It's clear that the content of the coverall contains items that could qualify as both accessory to a detached dwelling and agricultural related tools. We would ask that the Committee of Adjustment be satisfied that the coverall can be used for agricultural related uses and that they not impose condition 9 as requested by municipal staff. The third option of condition 9 that municipal staff requested involved providing proof that the coverall could be used for agricultural related purposes. And the image in front of you clearly provides proof that the coverall could be used for agricultural related purposes. We requested the committee remove this condition since we are now providing proof that the coverall could be used for agricultural related uses and as such as permitted standalone principal use. If you switch to the next slide, please. So should the Committee of Adjustment not want to remove condition 9 as requested by municipal staff, we would suggest a fourth option be included. Our client is very confident that should the severance be approved, he will be able to finalize the building permit process. An alternative option could be to have the owner enter into agreement with the City of Ottawa to remove the coverall if a residential use is not established on the retained parcel within 6 months of the approval of the severances. The reason we've brought this condition forward is we are confident our client will be able to finalize the building permit process should the severances be approved. And as I previously said, once a residential use is established, the coverall would become accessory to the new residential use and this problem would go away on its own. I'll let Mr. Chown speak to this more, but our primary intention, what we'd like to achieve rather is the committee of adjustment remove condition 9, and if they're not comfortable, we'd suggest this as an alternative. We've also read the conditions and we request that the committee of adjustment not impose condition number 2, as this relates to the provision of municipal services, and this is a rural severance which shouldn't apply. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. West. Mr. Chown, you wanted to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I did want to just reinforce a couple of Mr. West's comments with respect to condition number 9. We quite frankly don't think that there is any concern with respect to creating a non-conforming use or on the severed lot or the retained lot where the new house is proposed and has actually, construction has started on that property. We're quite confident that that coverall is a permitted use under the existing zoning and that condition 9 is not necessary. It's only in the abundance of caution that we've suggested a further option to condition 9, but we certainly, our primary focus here is to ask the committee to delete condition 9. We simply don't think it's necessary. One other observation that I've just realized is that if for whatever reason the committee feels that condition 9 is appropriate, it should only apply to application 00338, which is the severance of the existing dwelling. There's absolutely no issue with respect to application 339, which would create the vacant parcel. So our first ask of the committee, don't impose the condition at all. 2, if you are going to impose the condition, consider the additional option that Mr. West has put in front of you. 3, if you are going to impose the condition, it should only be related to application 338. But as I say, we believe are quite comfortable recommending to the committee that you don't need to impose the condition at all. It's just going to create, heartache for our client. And as Mr. West has indicated, the perceived problem simply goes away as soon as our client gets his building permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Mr. Gordon, can you make some comments for the city?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. As stated in the report, we have no concerns with the application subject to all of the conditions contained within the report. If we start removing these conditions, we will have some concerns. As for condition number 2, we discussed this in the previous committee hearing, that that's a standard condition that the engineers have been putting on. We do need to have that reworked. The intent is to ensure that services are not crossing lot lines. There is no requirement to connect to municipal services, so that one could be amended. I would ask that it not be fully removed, though. With regard to, I believe it's condition 9 about the coverall structure, the fact that a building could be used for agriculture is not the same as it being used for agriculture. And I would note the word could was used several times. And we provided 3 options because there's a history of that site being used for a landscaping business, which would not be permitted standalone in the general rural area. The fact that unauthorized building work has been undertaken on to start building a house, to lay the foundation. I mean, it's not something we can consider in making our decision. So we can't go, well, in 6 months there should be a house there. Like we can ignore the fact that the lot may not be zoning compliant. We need it to be compliant at the time of the lot creation, and we would require additional proof in order to satisfy that condition. The slide provided is a start, but we'll require more than that to be satisfied.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. I'd like now to ask the panel for any of their thoughts or comments. Mr. Otto?
I'm fine with the application and agree with planning that we do need some of those conditions imposed. So I would go with the conditions imposed as is.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lewis?
I support the application with condition 9 intact.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort?
Just a question for the applicant. So they've started building this house without a permit, is that correct? The foundation's in without a permit?
Through the chair, that is our understanding. A building permit application has been filed and the permit application has been reviewed. And further to Mr. West's comments, the only outstanding matter with respect to obtaining that permit is the finalization of the severance. The permit it's ready to be picked up subject to the severance. There's no other issues associated with the building permit, but you're correct that the work has commenced without the benefit of a permit.
I must say I tend to agree with Mr. Gordon's position here. I think we have to decide the application based on what exists, not what might be. So I would sort of align myself with Mr. Otto and Mr. Lewis on imposing condition number 9. And condition number 2, I think, can be cleared up just to confirm that as far as separate services go, that each lot has its own drainage and septic and wells. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, your comments, please.
Question for Mr. Gordon. At what point does a residence become complete enough to establish itself as a principal use? Like, do they have to have their occupancy permit issued, or do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay. So let's say it's once the building's built and at least there's temporary occupancy, just for some point to consider. So, and I presume they're holding the building permit because at the moment they are building 2 residences on 1 lot. So you need to sever the lot in order to be allowed to clear the building permit to go ahead. So that'll take a little while, and it takes a little while to build a house. The power that's an easement is being sought for to power the coverall structure, is that ultimately also to power the house? That's a question for the applicant.
Mr. Chandler?
The simple answer to that is no. That power serves only the coverall. The house will be served separately.
So why wouldn't wherever the service is being brought into the house then be what powers its accessory structure?
I think we're just trying to recognize the existing situation. Mr. Skinner is also on the panel, and he works with our client, and he may have some advice on that as well. But I think the purpose of the easement is simply to recognize the existing situation. Down the road, I guess there is the possibility of connecting the coverall to the power that's going to the house, but Mr. Skinner may have some further information on that.
Mr. Skinner, would you like to comment? You're muted, sir. You're still muted, Mr. Sketch. There you are.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have, I carried out the geotechnical inspections and I have no comment on the power situation, unfortunately.
Okay.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, no problem. No problem, but I can't comment, unfortunately.
Okay, one last question. With condition number 9, the wording is that you have to show that the lot is compliant with the zoning bylaw. Mr. Gordon, if it's determined that the lot is not compliant with the zoning bylaw because either the contents of the shed don't quite line up with the city's determination, and by the way, I don't think the committee's in a position to decide if something is compliant with the zoning bylaw or not. I don't think that's part of our job. What happens if it's not compliant? Can they get a zoning bylaw in time to get this severance through? Like, would they have to do an amendment, somehow stuff that into the next year before conditions lapse? Or pull down, the alternative is as they've suggested, which is pull down the coverall structure.
Through the chair, in order to satisfy that condition. So yes, if it's determined that the building is not compliant with the bylaw, they could then seek a temporary rezoning. They generally take, I would say, 4 or 5 months. So that should leave time within the 1 year lapse period to get that granted. Just going back to your previous question, Ms. Chandler, the house would only qualify as the principal use once technical occupancy has been granted.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying that. You know, I know this hasn't been anybody else's reasoning, but since the power's being brought individually to the coverall structure and not through the residents, it's as well as the fact that I think there is a way to satisfy number 9 in a way that actually is consistent with the agent's suggestion of taking down the coverall house. So number 9, you could satisfy that with a temporary rezoning or by bringing down the coverall, because that would make it compliant as well. I think I am good with the set of conditions as they are written right now. Sorry for taking up so much time.
That's okay, Ms. Chandler. Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Chandler? Sorry, Mr. Chown?
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I respect the comments from the committee in terms of the direction they're going on condition 9. I am, however, quite puzzled by the suggestion that condition 2 should remain. I have never seen this condition applied to a rural severance. It's a standard condition for a urban severance on full municipal services. There's simply no services here that could even possibly cross proposed lot lines. There's no water, there's no sanitary sewer, there's no storm sewer. So I don't frankly understand why that condition is being recommended to the committee. The only thing that exists on this property today is the well and septic system for the existing house. That well and septic system is located within the proposed lot. I don't understand the purpose of the condition. I also know I think it was withdrawn on a previous application this morning.
I think Mr. Gordon suggested that it has to be amended. He suggested the amendments are in process to reflect the rural nature of this particular property and the condition. It is a blanket conditions used for even urban settings. So I think he did describe it as making sure that the services are independent so that there is not sharing of septic systems or wells or anything like that. So he's going to modify, I think, that condition to reflect the rural nature of this application. Is that correct, Mr. Gordon?
Correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Ms. Chandler, yes.
You know what? Just for my 2 cents, I agree with Mr. Chown. Private services, generally the Ottawa Septic System Office, it's part of their MOU with the city that they review these applications with respect to independent services. I don't see any comments from them on this with respect to concerns of the locations of the services on the existing houses. So I actually don't think that condition should be put in for this application, this consent.
Okay. Thank you very much. So for that, to that end, I would like to ask the panel for approval of this application with modifications to the condition number 2.
What are the modifications?
Well, the modifications are that they are going to be separate services, and it's going to be modified to reflect Mr. Gordon's comments that separate services are not to be hooked into city services, but just they're going to be separate from each other property. Yes, Mr. Revort.
Mr. Chair, we've had this discussion at previous meetings, and the wording of the condition isn't very clear. But I think the intent was that that there's also demonstration that, for example, like drainage on the property is contained within the property. So if there's a ditch or whatever, it doesn't cross property lines. It is not shared drainage. So we don't have people, dumping water onto the neighbor's property or whatever. So that was the intent of that's the intent of the condition. I don't think the wording reflects that, but I think we've imposed this on a number of applications over the last while. So I don't know why we would change our practice right now. So I'd be in favor of clarifying the condition, but leaving it.
Thank you, Mr. Revort. So to that end, with that change that we were talking, that Mr. Revort clarified for us to condition number 2, I'm going to ask the panel for approval of this application with all 9 conditions with just that one change to condition number 2. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your applications are approved. Mr. West, Mr. Chown, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to application number 3. This is having to do with 140 Ivor Road. Mr. Breed, Tim Breed from FOTEN is the agent on file. Mr. Breed, are you available?
Hello, Mr. Chair and committee.
Good morning.
Hello.
I need to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Can you take that oath this morning?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chair.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time. Do you swear?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please proceed with a brief description of your application, sir.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, my name is Tim Beed. It's actually B-E-E-D, Beed, Planning and Design. I'm here representing the property owner, Crest Point Real Estate Investments, to request permission to extend an existing lease beyond the 21-year timeframe. So as you know, in order to do this, the owner requires consent of the committee for long-term lease in excess of 21 years. FOTEN, as well as City of Ottawa Planning Department, in their report acknowledged that this application is a technical application in nature, and it's important to note that no physical changes to the properties are proposed, and they will continue to operate as they are now. Next slide, please. So briefly, the lands are located on Ivor Road in the West Ottawa community of Stittsville. They have frontage on Harry Douglas and Ivor. They are included within the Stittsville Business Park, an employment area encompassing the corridor from Hazeldean to east and south. The 2 portions of the site are known as 140 Ivor, which is the southern portion and subject of this application, and 130 Ivor, which is the northern portion. They have been established to operate independently with separate access and egress for vehicles, servicing and landscape buffer functionally separating the 2 portions of the land. Next slide, please. In this slide, we can see the current operation of the property in terms of the access and egress points for each separate property at 140 and 130, as well as the dash line indicating the approximate severance line and landscape buffer, which acts today as a functional separation of the 2 properties. Site considerations such as servicing, grading, stormwater management, parking, snow storage and the like have been previously addressed through the development review and building permit process at the time of the initial construction of the buildings on each property in 2006. Next slide, please. Just a number of slides showing the existing condition along Iber Road. This is 140 Iber, the southern entrance, the northern entrance from 140 Iber. Next slide, please. As well as the entrance for the 130 Iber Road property. Next slide, please. This is to indicate that although the properties do abut their rear yard to existing residential, there's a significant landscape buffer at a minimum of 20 meters, extending to 40 to 60 meters, with the buildings acting as screens and noise buffers, privacy buffers to those existing residential properties. Next slide, please. Briefly describe the proposal. So the owner, which is Crest Point, requests to extend a lease, which is will total a period in excess of 21 years for the current tenant that occupies 140 Iber, contains a mid-sized light industrial building. And as you know, this requires consent of committee. The entire subject lands are shown as part 1 through 5 on the submitted draft 4R plan. The land to be leased is shown as parts 4 and 5 on the draft plan. It has a frontage of 117 meters on Iber Road and 167 meters lot depth, with a total of 20,112 square meters, which reflects the existing footprint of the building and associated abutting area, including access and egress, surface parking, landscaping, loading, and the like. The retained lands would have a total area of approximately 10,000 square meters and continue to have 60 meters of frontage on Iber with independent access as per the existing conditions. Next slide, please. It's important to note that the consent application to facilitate the extension of the lease beyond the 21 years will not alter the existing condition or operational program of the lands at 140 Iber or 130 Iber, with all existing conditions to remain. Next slide, please. Just a brief policy and regulatory review. The subject lands are zoned light industrial as per the Ottawa zoning bylaw. This purpose of the light industrial zone is to permit a wide range of low impact light industrial and employment uses, warehousing and shipping and the like, in accordance with the direction of the employment areas of the zoning bylaw as well as the official plan. The consent application proposes the creation of the new parcel solely for long-term lease. And as this does not constitute the creation of conveyable lot and does not result in the change of legal ownership of the lands, as a result, the proposed lands remain part of the larger parcel and continue to function as such with existing separate access. And therefore, no zoning compliance issues are raised by this application. And the proposed lots continue to comply with the provisions of the light industrial zone, including lot area width and the like. And it satisfies the other performance standards of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. The subject lands are also designated urban employment area within the official plan. The intent of this area and designation is to ensure that over the long term, sufficient areas of land are reserved for business, industrial, and economic activities. And this designation is generally meant to provide larger parcels reflective of the user's needs for outdoor storage, parking, building floor plates, and things of that nature. The existing buildings, site layout, and uses of the subject lands continue to adhere to the objectives of the official plan, specifically the urban employment lands designation. Next slide, please. Importantly, the subject lands are on a existing major collector road with convenient and immediate access to proposed and existing arterial roadways, which are meant to facilitate higher volumes of traffic, including traffic associated with light industrial uses. Next slide, please. So it's our professional planning opinion that the proposed consent for long-term lease constitutes good planning as it adheres to the general objectives and intentions of the official plan, zoning bylaw, and continues to operate as such, was originally approved on both properties. Thank you, and I can answer any questions if you have them at this time.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd now like to ask Mr. Harrigan from the Planning Department to provide some comments.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department recognizes that this application is strictly technical in nature, just to extend existing operations in a lease over 21 years. No modifications will take place to the building, the lot line, no new lots are creating or conveyable land. And as such, we have no concerns with this application.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan. Mr. Lewis, any questions or comments?
None.
Thank you. Mr. Otto?
In short, none.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Revort?
Just a question. I thought that there was a correction to the legal description that it should read part of lot 15. I'm not sure if we've picked that up.
No, we haven't. Thank you very much, Mr. Vervoort. Is that correct? Mr. Bede?
That is, yes, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Thank you. We'll make that modification.
My other question was, I thought there was an exemption under the Planning Act if you're leasing the whole of the building.
As Mr. Chair, as per my understanding, when a long-term lease extends past the 21 years for a portion of the properties, the consent of committee is required. Mr. Harrigan could possibly speak further to that, but my understanding is that the application is required for consent in this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. I too support the application. Please raise your hands if you support the application and approve it. Thank you. The application is approved, Mr. Deed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee.
Moving on to application number 8. This application concerns 18606 Line Road. Mr. Polton, are you available? Good morning, Mr. Polton.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
I need to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on the property. Can you take that oath this morning?
Yes, I can.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time. Do you swear?
Yes, I swear.
Please proceed with a brief description of your application, sir.
Okay. My name is Ryan Polton. I'm a planner at Novatech, and I'm acting as agent on behalf of the owners of 1866 Line Road. I understand I've provided a brief presentation, hoping that that pops up. Just waiting for it to pop up on my screen here. There we are. So the property is 1866 Line Road. It's in the West Carleton March ward of the city of Ottawa. It's north of Canada, and it's actually just north of the D&D rifle range. If we go to the next slide, it's a zoomed in map showing the lot fabric. And you can see there's a little bit of frontage along 6th Line Road as well as on the Ottawa River. The property is 6.5 acres. The very eastern part of the property is treed. You can see it on the aerial photo, and it's actually got quite a steep slope down to the river. The remaining part of the property is relatively flat at the same elevation as 6th Line Road. Moving to slide 4. Sorry, yes, it would be this slide here. This shows a pathway that's existing over the property to the north at 1876 Line Road. This pathway has been used to access the shoreline of the Ottawa River for the past 30 years. It's well defined, and it's the only access between the two properties to the Ottawa River. On this specific air photo, I think it's from 2012, you can clearly see the path outline taken. The next slide I have is some site photos. Yes, and it shows, these are photos we took on site of the path. It's very clearly traversable and wide and well maintained to the extent where you can get small motor vehicles down this path most of the way. You'll also notice in the top right photo, there's a pipe. That pipe is for water. Water's pumped up from the Ottawa River for aggregation purposes. near the house at 1876 Line Road. The two bottom photos are the end of the pathway and the shoreline of the Ottawa River. So you can see this path is clearly used, well maintained, and is used to access the beach and the shoreline of the Ottawa River. The next slide I have is going to be the draft reference plan. This identifies the parts of 1866 Line Road we're asking for an easement over. Part 2 is the end of the pathway. Part 1 would be the waterfront and the beach. So our application is for access over parts 1 and part 2 on this draft reference plan in favor of the property to the north at 1876 Line Road. The current situation is we have the same owners of the properties, of the two adjacent properties. And in the future, the 1866 Line Road was severed about 12 years ago. And if he wants to proceed with selling that, he wants to be able to maintain access to the waterfront. The only way to maintain that access, the existing conditions, is for this easement application. And so my last slide that I have will be our easement sketch. This shows the whole property in profile from 6th Line Road all the way through to the Ottawa River. So you can see it's a long, narrow lot, and the easement really only applies just to the very end, just at the shoreline over the of the Ottawa River. So this application is for no new construction. It's simply recognizing the existing pathway there and the existing access to the waterfront. This application isn't considered development, and it's not considered site alteration. Nothing will change essentially through approval of this application. It will just continue to maintain the owner of 1870's permission to access the waterfront should 1860 6th Line Road be sold in the future. This application will not impact the city's tree cover in any way. It formalizes the existing use of the land, and it's consistent with the policies of the PPS. And so that we ask that the committee approve this application as filed.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Thank you, Mr. Fulton. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Gordon from the city's planning department to make some comments.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the department has no concerns with the application subject to the one standard condition in our report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fulton, you in agreement with that easement agreement request?
Yes. Yes, I am in agreement with that condition. It's a standard condition required for the easement regardless. So we are in agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Ms. Chandler?
I don't have any concerns. I am curious why it's presented as two separate parts.
Mr. Fulton?
So the surveyor chose to illustrate the proposed easement in two separate parts, differentiating the path and the shoreline. It was just the decision of the surveyor. It could have easily been one part. It's shown as two parts. So we filed it consistent with the prepared draft reference plan.
Mr. Lewis, any comments?
No concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort?
No comments or concerns. Thank you.
And Mr. Otto?
No comments and concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application with the one condition. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Fulton. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Now on to application number 9. Application number 9 has to do with 6980 Mansfield Road. Mr. Clinton Bennett is the agent on file. Mr. Bennett, are you available? I see Wendy Bennett. There we go. You're muted, Ms. Bennett. There we go. I can hear. Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you. I need to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Can you take that oath this morning?
Yes, I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I do.
Please proceed with a brief description of your application, ma'am.
My husband and I own the property at 6980 Mansfield Road, which is 44 hectares in size. The front half of our property is zoned Ag and the rear half on Bleaks is zoned RU. We are requesting approval to sever 2 residential lots for future development, each being of 3.17 hectares in size, fronting on Bleaks Road. Both lots would be within the RU designated zoning and meet the MDS setback requirements. We've had the EIS report done and concluded that they have no concerns with the severance. And the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, they've also provided their comments and have no concerns. And the hydrogeology report should be completed within the next couple of weeks. And I received the 6 conditions from the city of approval. The only one I had concern with was number 2, where they're looking for to do storm sanitary water services because we would be on a well and septic.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Gordon, have you got some comments to make on behalf of the city?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department has no concerns with the application subject to the conditions in the report. And similar to previous discussions, the intent of number 2 is demonstrating that services don't cross lot lines and that drainage can be handled on each lot respectively rather than crossing lines. We're happy to amend the wording to better capture that understanding.
Thank you.
Does that work, Ms. Bennett? Ms. Bennett, does that work for you?
Yes, it does.
Now I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Ms. Chandler?
I have no additional questions.
Mr. Lewis?
No comments, thanks.
Mr. Otto?
I'm in support, but I would like to ask planning when we're going to get that corrected in regards to the second condition, so that we don't have to go through this every time there's an application in the rural area.
Yes.
Mr. Gordon? Yeah.
The plan is to have a discussion within planning this morning and send something off to the engineers. So it's our hope that this should be implemented for the next committee, and we should have that in place going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Anything further, Mr. Otto?
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Vervoort, any questions or comments?
No, looks fine to me. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Already been there, done that. We're still good.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application with all 6 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Ms. Bennett, with 6 conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On to number 11. And this application has to do with 26969 Line Road. Rod Price, are you available? Mr. Price. There you are. Good morning, Mr. Price.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Rod Price on behalf of the owners of 2696 9th Line Road out in Metcalfe.
Thank you. I'd like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on the property. Can you take that oath today?
I most certainly can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I can swear, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Please proceed with a brief description of your application, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, Rod Price, Rortar Land Development Consultants on behalf of the owners of 2696 9th Line Road. Before you is a couple of applications for some 2-acre severances off of Victoria Street, just east of the village of Metcalfe. If you'll recall, we were before you and adjourned at the request of staff and in agreement with ourselves for further discussion with regard to the proposed location of the 2-acre lots. We've had some fantastic conversations with staff, provided a rationale that I think has helped alleviate some of the concerns with respect to proposed severances within a kilometer of existing village boundaries, to help not impede any future village expansions that may occur. I believe ourselves and staff are somewhat aligned. I know they have minor concerns, and originally the thought from staff was that the lots would be, given the OP policies, to be located off of 9th line. However, it is an active cropping operation with Castor River Farms. And as well, the OP policy does allow for some flexibility in that the policy states that these severances should be located on more of a rural road than a regional road or a county road, such as Victoria. That being said, the location of the proposed lots were pretty thoroughly thought out, both in terms of the village expansion and providing 2 additional frontages across Victoria, but also not fragmenting the existing cropping operation. So not only is there that flexibility that, in certain special circumstances, there is the ability to locate these proposed lots on the regional road. We're trying to maintain somewhat of the most arable land for cropping, and given the location of the proposed lots is the rockiest and the hardest for George to farm, that was the reason for the location of that. So it sounds as though staff, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but they concur with those locations. We're okay with the conditions that are proposed in the staff report, other than, not that we want to take on the fight, but just for the record, still will always disagree with the fact of taking road widenings off retained portions, especially when it's as large as this, but we know where that discussion goes. So that's just more for the record. Happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gordon, can you make some comments on behalf of the planning department?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. We have spoken with the applicant and Mr. Price in the time since the initial adjournment. Our conversation alleviated a lot of our concerns. Our report notes minor concerns, but that is mostly just pertaining to the requirement under the severance policy, or well, it's a requirement, but it's not fully enforced in that it says should front onto the local road rather than the higher order road. But when considered in the balance of all the policies, particularly the intent of the general rural area, which is to maintain agriculture and allow for limited severances, we're generally satisfied with the application, subject to the conditions in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Now, condition number 2 talks about an independent services as well. You're going to make those modifications as we talked about on previous applications today?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Price, are you in agreement with that?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler, any questions, comments, or concerns?
None. I agree that although the policy suggests the lot should front on a different road, that pragmatically it makes a lot more sense where they are right now. So I'm comfortable with the application as it stands.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. Mr. Lewis?
I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Vervoort?
No concerns, thank you.
Mr. Otto?
Fully support the applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Otto. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application approved, Mr. Price. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, I know a lot of the times between applicants and staff, there's some headbutting, but staff was tremendous and open-minded in this approach. So I'd like to commend them. Job well done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. Thanks.
Thanks
Nice
everyone.
to hear.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Now I'd like to move on to application number 12. Application number 12 is to do with 2851 Cowell Road. Mr. Brooks, are you available? Good morning, sir.
Good morning again.
I would like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting today. Can you take that oath?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Please proceed with a brief description of your application.
These are two rural residential lots on Cow Road, and they do conform the OP designation, the zoning designation, and the zoning bylaw. The comments I would like to make has been asked to make.
Mr. Brooks, I just want to interrupt. We can't hear you, so could you move closer to your microphone?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
All right.
Yes.
I'll repeat my comments. The two rural residential lots are on Cow Road, and they do meet the requirements of the OP designation, the zoning designation, and the zoning bylaw. And I have been asked to make two comments for the record. The corrections on the B0002, the frontage is 60 meters, the depth is 135, and the area is 0.81 hectares or 2 acres. And that is shown on the comments to the committee of adjustment, and similar for B0003, 60 meters, 135 in depth and 0.81 hectares. Other than that, we will agree with the conditions. And the comment I would like to make, as I've made on every application, is road widening. And the request here, perhaps the committee is not aware of the road widening on Mackey Road. The Severances are on Cow Road, but the property runs from Cowell to Mackey Road. And the road widening on Mackey Road, which is over a mile away from Cow Road, runs through a gravel pit if that road widening is required. So it's a concern. We're going to move ahead with the conditions, but again, I raised the road widening. That is a concern that we are looking at closely.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And now I'd like to ask Mr. Gordon to comment on behalf of planning.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Planning has no concerns with the application subject to the conditions contained within our report. Road widening, the particulars of road widening have been clarified previously through a legal opinion, and we're required to take it on both severed and retained parcels at the earliest development opportunity. And I would note that some revisions will be required to the EIS, but that is captured under our conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. I'd like to ask our conservation partners if they've got any questions or comments.
And
Mr.
no
Lalonde.
concerns or no concerns or objections from our end.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lalonde. Now I'd like to ask a panel for their comments. Mr. Vervoort.
No comments or concerns.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler.
Nothing to add.
Mr. Otto.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Mr. Lewis.
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor, panel in favor of this application, please raise your hands. The application is approved. Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you.
We'll move on to application number 17. Application number 17 has to do with 68 Strachan Street. Mr. Brock Tom is the agent on file. Mr. Tom, are you available? Good morning, Mr. Tom.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
I'd like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Can you take that oath this morning?
Excuse me. Yes, I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed with a brief description of your application, sir.
Will do. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Brock Tom. I'm a project manager with Equitas Developments. I'm here today to make application on behalf of our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Tovett, who are the owners of the property, in order to obtain approval to build an addition on their 1950s family home located at 68 Strachan in Richmond. Mr. and Mrs. Tovett have resided in this home for several years with their young daughter, and they wish to increase the size of their home slightly in order to make it more conducive for their family. If I could get the coordinator at this time to bring up the first PDF. It does a pretty good job of illustrating what we're dealing with. So this is the nuts and bolts. The home resides on a half-acre lot, which backs directly onto the Jock River. As such, the variance being requested is relief from the 30-meter setback from the water's edge. The existing home is situated 21.35 meters from the water's edge, which is a difference of 8.65 meters. It should be noted that this home is located in the floodplain, which contributes to the parameters that were considered during design. The scale of the original concept contributed to its encroachment into the setback. The proposed addition is located at the southeast corner of the existing home and has been modified from the original submission based on guidance we received from the city planning department. The original concept that was submitted included an addition that was over twice the size of what's being presented today, and the rear face of it encroached nominally further into the rear yard setback towards the water. The early version was based on information that we received from a representative at the RVCA who explained that additions classified as type 2 can reach up to 50 square meters in scale, provided that they meet certain criteria, which this specific one did. Upon submission to the city planning staff, it was explained that the city requirements for additions in the floodplain cannot exceed 20 square meters. At this time, concern for the setback was also expressed. In order to attempt to satisfy the concerns from the city, we redesigned the addition at a significantly smaller scale and moved its location away from the water's edge so that it's in line with the rear face of the existing structure. Our submission is now 9.36 square meters over 2 stories, which is 19 square meters total, which falls within the 20 square meters required by the city in the floodplain. This allowed us to move, like I stated, it allowed us to move the structure in line with the rear face of the existing home. Our overall distance from the water's edge is now consistent with the rear face. And it should be noted that this hearing's been adjourned twice now because the planning department understandably required information pertaining to the accuracy of the dimensions originally provided from the water to the structure. The dimension originally provided was the water's edge, and the planning department requested location of the normal high water mark. We've since provided this by way of a letter from our surveyor who's indicated that the 2 locations are actually consistent with one another. Our hope is that these concessions demonstrate adequate efforts to conform to planning guidelines as closely as possible. And we hope that the committee will agree and approve our application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tom. I'd like to ask Mr. Gordon to make some comments on behalf of planning, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The planning department has no concerns with the application. We appreciate the applicant providing that required letter from their surveyor to confirm that the water's edge and normal high water mark are one and the same. I would note that the the minor variance should just be rewritten to the to permit a reduced setback of 21.35 meters from the normal high water mark, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum of 30. So that would just require the change of water's edge to normal high water mark in order to be consistent with the zoning bylaw. I would also note in my report, it does say subject to the conditions below. That is standard wording that was carried over. There are no conditions on this minor variance.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Now I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Mr. Lewis.
No problem. It's good. Looks good.
Thank you. Mr. Otto.
Looks good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler.
I don't have any particular concerns. I wouldn't mind hearing from the Conservation Authority.
Okay. Can I ask our conservation partners for their comments?
Yeah, if I may, through the chair, the Conservation Authority has no objections to the application, given the scale of the development and the location of the addition not being closer than the existing rear of the structure. The size, I believe the 20 square meters is in line with the city's zoning bylaw. Would also be comprised in our policies. It should be noted that a permit from our office is required, and we would handle details such as flood proofing and other requirements through that permitting process.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Chandler?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any questions or comments?
None, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll excuse Ms. Chandler. Thank you very much for your work today. Have a great week.
You too.
Thanks. Now we'll proceed to applications 13 and 14, hearing number 13 first. Number 13 is having to do with 2066 Stagecoach Road. Mr. West, are you available as the agent on file? Good morning, Mr. West.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just a quick note, we had already requested to adjourn this application to November 17th.
I'm sorry, it's numbers 15 and 16. My apologies.
Excellent.
15 and 16. And this is Mr. West again. Thanks. I need to administer the oath for the sign posting. Can you take that oath today?
Yes, I can.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time. You swear?
I swear.
Please proceed with a brief description of your applications.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the coordinator to start sharing the presentation. Excellent. Thank you. So the applications that are in front of you this morning are for a severance and minor variance application on the property municipally known as 6100 Goff. Switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. The context of the subject property is shown in the image in front of you. It's located in the Osgood ward of the city of Ottawa. It's on the south side of Goff Road. Subject property is an area bounded by rural residential lots to the north, east, and west. And the subject property is bounded by a woodlot to the south. For greater context, the subject property is east of Manotick and west of Greeley. This area of the city is characterized by many rural residential estates. As you know, this may be a rural area, but it is extremely residential, as you can see from the image in front of you. Switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the subject property is shown in the image in front of you. I would note that Geo Ottawa shows the subject property as two separate properties, as you can see from the yellow line that splits it into two, divided into east and west. And both of these parcels are known as 6100 Goff. Both of these parcels shown in the image in front of you have their own unique roll numbers and pins. And as such, each parcel has its own separate City of Ottawa property tax bills. The parcel on the east is considered to have merged on title with the property to the west, and it can only be conveyed by itself through a Planning Act application, and hence why we are here today. And to put it quite bluntly, the starting and ending result of the severance application, should it be approved today, it will be nearly identical to what you see on the image in front of you as the existing condition. You switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. The lands to be severed are shown in red. The severed lands have an area of 2.27 hectares with a frontage of 149.5 meters on Goff Road. The lands to be retained are shown in green. The retained lands have an area of 1.16 hectares with a frontage of 78.4 meters on Goff Road. The retained lands contain an existing detached dwelling. The only difference between this image and the aerial on the previous slide showing the lot fabric as it exists today is that we have moved the new property line that separates these two parcels over about 10 meters to the east. And this was done to give the retained lot a little bit more privacy from any new residential construction on the lands to be severed. Again, the beginning and ending result will look extremely similar to the existing condition. I'll now speak to the rationale for the severances. So the proposed severances within the rural area of the city of Ottawa. It has regard for the following matters of provincial interest: supply, efficient use and conservation of energy and water, adequate provision, efficient use of transportation, sewage and water services, minimization of waste, the orderly development, safe and healthy communities, the adequate provision of full range of housing, and the appropriate location for growth. The proposed severance, or the proposed severed lot, has an adequate supply of land to ensure requirements for the provision of private services, and the proposed severed lot has frontage on a public road. As such, is not premature. With respect to conformity to the official plan, I'm going to skip this for now and come back to it. With respect to the suitability of land for the purpose for which it is to be subdivided, the property is zoned residential, rural residential subzone 2, which is RR2 in the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw. And the eastern portion of the subject property is subject to exception 651R, which requires a minimum lot area of 3 hectares. A minor variance application is required to reduce this minimum lot area to 2.25 hectares to be consistent with the image in front of you. And the lot width of the severed and retained parcels fully comply to the requirements of the zoning bylaw. With respect to dimensions and shapes of the proposed lot, as I just mentioned, a minor variance will be required to reduce the minimum lot area of the 651 exception, rural exception. With respect to adequacy of school sites, there are schools located in both Manotick and Greeley. If I could ask the coordinator to switch to the next slide, please. So coming back to the conformity with the official plan, I'd like to walk the Committee of Adjustment through policy 1920 of section 3.7.2, which details the official plan policies related to infill outside of historical settlement area. And policy 9 off the top says limited residential infill through the severance of lots will be considered in areas meeting the following criteria. A, the proposed severance has road frontage on a paved and maintained public road. The proposed severance has frontage on Goff Road, which is a paved and maintained road. You can see on the image on the right side of your screen. If you can also see there's a gated area on the right side of the road, and this is the buildable area that was identified through the EIS. Switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. The policy 19B states the proposed severance is opposite residential lots with frontage on the same road. As you can see on the image on the right side of the screen, the proposed severance is opposite residential lots with frontage on Goff Road. And if I just ask the coordinator to switch to the next slide, please. Just taking it back a step further, there are rural residential lots not only across from the subject property, but the entirety of the south side of Goff Road is completely littered with rural residential lots. The east side of the subject property that we're referring to today is the only vacant quote unquote lot on the entire south side of the street. Quite simply, it's the quote unquote last piece of the puzzle for infill on this street. The image in front of you makes it abundantly clear that the proposed severance would be located in an area characterized by rural residential lots. Please switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So policy C states the proposed severance is a vacant lot between two existing dwellings that are situated on the same side of the road and are not more than 250 meters apart. And the key word in this policy that I've bolded and underlined on the image in front of you is situated. And situated is not a term that's actually defined in the zoning bylaw or official plan, but is commonly defined as located. I have the definition from dictionary.com, and I found a few other definitions that all have it synonymous with located. And as the Committee of Adjustment knows, houses on corner lots, and I'll get to this in a second, are situated on two different streets. The above policy does not make reference to facing, where it easily could have. The following slide shows the distance between the house on 6100 Goff that will be on the retained parcel and the house on 1442 Manotick Station Road. If you switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the distance between the existing house on 6100 Goff Road, which is directly to the west, or I guess the western parcel that we're talking about today, and the existing house on 1442 Manotick Station Road, which is directly to the east of the proposed severance, is approximately 215 meters. This is well below the requirement of 250 meters that policy C refers to. And the intent of policy C is to ensure that any new houses in the rural area, since we are talking about infill outside of historical settlements area, are located in close proximity to each other. And this is done in an effort to reduce the strain of providing municipal services to any new rural residential developments. And these services could include snow plowing or waste collection, anything like that. The proposed severance is a location that is characterized by rural residences. As I previously discussed, it's the only vacant spot in the entire south side of Goff Road. And it is located between two existing dwellings that are not more than 250 meters apart. If the coordinator can switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. And what I was referring to with respect to corner lots is the property to the east, which is 1442 Manotick Station Road, is a corner lot. And regardless of where the front door is, it's quite clear that the Goff side road of the building is frequently used. It's our opinion that the proposed severance complies with policy C, policy 19C, as written and as intended. You can switch to the next slide, please. The final set of policies in the infill outside of historical areas section of 3.7.2 is D. The lots created, including the retained parcel, should be of similar size to the existing surrounding lots, but must at least be 0.8 hectares in size. So the key word in this policy, as I've bold and underlined in front of you, is should be. This policy does not say shall be. The severed lot is 2.27 hectares in size, and the retained lot is 1.16 hectares in size. And the areas of the surrounding lots are shown on the following slide. If I could ask the coordinator to switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. The area of the proposed severed and retained lots are slightly larger than the most of the immediate surrounding lots, but it is worth noting that there are several quite large lots near the subject property as well. The policy is that the area of the proposed and severed retained lots should be of similar size to the existing surrounding lots, and they have to be greater than 0.8 hectares. It's our opinion that the proposed severed and retained lots are of similar size to the surrounding lots, and it's a fact that the proposed lots are greater than 0.8 hectares. The proposed lots are almost identical if you look at the property today, and the slightly shifted lot line, as I mentioned earlier, can actually be seen by the hatched yellow line on the property. As I previously stated, this was just done in an effort to give the current landowner on the west side of the property a little bit more privacy from any new development on the eastern side. We ask the coordinator to switch to the next slide, please. The final policy of section 3.7.2 that I want to walk the committee through is policy 20, which states in reference to policy 19, which is the policies we just went over, no more than 2 lots will be created from any lot in existence on the 13th of May 2003, or from a lot that's approved by council under its grandparenting policies after the date. In addition, no further severances will be permitted from either the severed or retained lot. So I guess the reason we're in this situation right now is the image on the right side of your screen was a one severance application from a lot that existed in 2003, and this application conveyed the eastern portion of the property to the western portion of the property. Severing the lot today, severing the eastern portion of the property, would be the second severance from a lot that existed on the 13th of May 2003. And we understand that no further severances will be permitted on the severed and retained property as a result of this application. So I ask the coordinator to switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as I briefly discussed, a minor variance application is required for the eastern parcel. There is a site-specific exception on this property, the eastern side, 651R, which is highlighted in the red box around the eastern parcel on the image in front of you. This exception requires a minimum lot area of 3 hectares. The background behind this exception is unclear. What's noted is that the exception lands, which are currently shown on the red square on the parcel on the image in front of you, doesn't even comply with the requirements of this exception today. Quite simply, this exception is a remnant exception that doesn't make sense on the property, and we are seeking a minor variance application to permit a reduced minimum lot area of 2.25 hectares, which would make this lot area consistent with the size of the severed parcel. I'll now quickly go through the 4 tests for minor variance. The first test for minor variance, the general intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. The subject property is designated general rural area in the City of Ottawa official plan. The intent of the general rural area designation is to accommodate a variety of land uses that are appropriate for rural location and to limit the amount of residential development such that development will not preclude or resist continued agricultural and other non-residential uses. The proposed minor variance facilitate a rural residential severance on the subject property. The proposed lot is generally consistent with the surrounding lots with respect to area and with respect to use. The proposed rural residential use is considered appropriate for the general rural area. The second test for a minor variance application is the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The proposed minor variance facilitates a rural residential severance in the general rural area, and the subject property is located in an area that's quite characterized by rural residential lots. The proposed lot is subject to exception 651R, which requires a minimum lot area of 3 hectares, and a minor variance is required to permit a reduced lot area of 2.25 hectares. The lot width of both the severed and retained parcels comply with the 50-meter width requirement of the RR2 zone. And the underlying RR2 zone, the intent of the minimum lot area requirement is to provide adequate area for the provision of private services. The proposed lot will be 2.27 hectares in size and will have more than sufficient space to accommodate any private services. The third test for a minor variance, the general, is considered desirable for the use of land. And this is the only vacant lot on the entire southern side of Goth Road. A rural residential dwelling on the proposed lot is considered desirable as is consistent with the rural character of the area and is quite simply the last piece of the puzzle. Development on the proposed lot will increase the supply of rural residential homes without detracting from the rural character of the area or increasing any strain on municipal services such as waste collection or snow plowing. It's considered desirable to develop the subject property as in the east side with a detached dwelling. The fourth test is that a variance is considered minor in nature. And this reduction in minimum required lot area supports development of a detached dwelling in an area where it's quite simply the last piece of a puzzle is missing with a detached dwelling. The proposed reduction in minimum required lot area exceeds the 0.8 hectare lot area requirements of the underlying RR2 zone. As in, the underlying RR2 zone has a minimum lot area requirement of 0.8 hectares, and the proposed 2.25 hectares is quite larger. Given that Goff Road is heavily developed with rural residential lots, the development of the proposed lot will have no impact on the surrounding neighbors or detract from the rural residential character of the area. It's our consideration and our opinion that the 4 tests for minor variance are met. So switch to the next slide, please. Thank you. It's the end of my presentation.
Okay. Thanks very much, Mr. West. I'd like to ask Planning, Sean Harrigan, can you please make some comments on behalf of the city?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department objects to this application, and I'll break down our rationale into 4 parts. I'll talk about the history, then I'll talk about policy 20, then 19, and then I'll speak to the minor variance application. Now, for the history of this parcel, the conveyed lands, which they're now looking to sever, was originally done as part of a 2005 application, which was undertaken by the property directly south of them. They submitted 2 consent applications. One of them is to create the parcel that is on the corner lot of Manotick Station and Goff Road, known as 1442 Manotick Station. And then the second one was to convey the lands in subject right now that are proposed to be severed to 6100 Goff Road. A main condition of approval for that application was a requirement to undertake a rezoning application. One was for the retained parcel, which was to require a reduced zoning requirement for minimum lot size from 17.2 hectares to 13 hectares to mimic the 13 hectares size of the retained land. It was very specific that it was meant to rezone it to what it existed now. The second portion of that rezoning was to rezone the entirety of 6100 Goff Road. And I have looked up the previous planning reports and staff recommendations, and all of 6100 Goff Road was meant to be rezoned to a minimum lot size of 3 hectares instead of what was originally there, which was the RR zoning, which required 0.8. So it was meant to reflect its new lot size. Now, when the amalgamation happened, there was a mistranslation when they translated the Osgood bylaw to the current city of Ottawa, and only the conveyed portion was rezoned. So it was meant to be the entirety of the parcel, but we recognize this mistake as it is now. So that is the history of this parcel. Now, speaking to policy 20, policy 20 very specifically states that a maximum of 2 lots can be created from any lot in existence as of May 13th, 2003. That wording is used throughout all of the severance policies for the general rural area and the rural natural features area. And that is done very deliberately to ensure that a limited number of severances occur. Our entire severance policies rest on the wording of this policy, which is carried out through multiple policies. This lot, as it existed in 2003, was too small to be severed. It was only enlarged in 2005 that it can meet the minimum size requirements. Permitting this to occur is in direct conflict of the official plan and opens the door for an abundance of severances for lots that are too small now that could simply convey land back and forth to keep permitting severances. This is absolutely something the department entirely opposes, and we have opposed for the entirety of this policy. So that is in direct conflict of the official plan, and we object on that reason. Now, that aside, we did take a look at the policy 19, which is the criteria for the infill policy. Now, as I've mentioned multiple times for other applications, this policy is very strict. It has 4 criteria that should all be satisfied entirely before it can move forward. It is meant to recognize special circumstances, and that's why these criteria exist. The planning department is of opinion that 2 of those criteria are entirely not satisfied. They are completely in contradiction with the criteria. Now, the first one is that the proposed severance is a vacant lot that is between 2 dwellings that are situated on the same side of the road, not more than 250 meters apart. They're within 250 meters, so that portion of the criteria is satisfied. But the corner lot on Manotick Station is not situated on Goff Road. Now, as Mr. West indicated, he is correct that the zoning bylaw doesn't have a definitive definition of the word situated, which is why we go to city lawyers or city legal services and zoning interpreters to determine this. And they are in opinion that it does mean placed on or located, and is very clearly based on the Google Street View map that Mr. West showed. It is situated and located on Manotick Station. The bylaw doesn't say have frontage on both roads or on the same road. It says situated, and it is not situated on Goff Road. It is very clearly situated on Manotick Station, as demonstrated by the image that Mr. West has shown. So because of that reason, we also object. Now, the second one is for D, that the lots, including the retained and severed parcel, must be of a similar size to the existing, should be of a similar size to the existing surrounding lots. The proposed severed lot is nearly 3 times the size of all of the lots around them, except for the 2 larger parcels, of which it's less than 1/3 of the size of those lots. That is not the similar size to those parcels. The frontage as well, too, is more than double the frontage of the lots directly across from them, from any of the other smaller residential lots in there, and very clearly is not of a similar size. So we object for that reason as well, too. Now, regards to the minor variance application, as I mentioned, the zoning designation was placed as part of a condition of approval for the 2005 consent applications. It was very clearly done to increase the minimum lot size for 6100 Goff Road from 0.8 hectares to 0.3 hectares, which would represent and reflect its new current lot size of about 3.3 hectares or 3.4 hectares. Doing a minor variance against this, it is a site-specific rezoning designation. It was intended to remain this size. Doing a minor variance for this it does not follow the general intent of the zoning bylaw, and we can't support it for that reason. And furthermore, the minor variance is required for a severance application that is not supported by the official plan. Permitting this minor variance would not adhere to the general intent of the official plan. And for that reason also, we must object to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan. Mr. Chown, do you want to make some comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Harrigan, for your very well thought out comments on the application. Having said that, I think we have a professional difference of opinion with respect to those comments, and let me just deal with them in order. With respect to policy 20, Mr. Harrigan has raised the specter that if we were to allow the severance, it's going to encourage applications across the region or the rural area where there's going to be all sorts of these adjustments to lot areas and there's going to be severances all over the place. That isn't true. And even in Mr. Harrigan's report, he notes that if this application is approved, then there could be no further severances from the property at 1490 Manotick Station Road. So this doesn't open the door for a whole bunch of additional variances if you were to approve this application despite policy 20. I have not had, with respect to policy 19 and the word situated, we haven't had conversations with the city's legal department, but I have a great deal of difficulty that somebody would suggest that the property at the corner of Manotick Station Road and Goff Road somehow isn't situated on Goff Road. The image that Mr. West showed you of that corner property shows a driveway off of Goff Road to that property. The structures, the house on that property are clearly visible from Goff Road. The property clearly has frontage on Goff Road. I simply do not understand how the city could offer up the opinion that that house is not situated on Goff Road. So we are certainly of the opinion that the application before you meets that test for a severance as an infill severance outside of a settlement area. And then the other policy where we clearly have a difference of opinion is the language that refers to the lots should be of similar size. the reason for that policy is to make sure that through the application of these policies, we aren't creating smaller lots than the ones that are already out there. Because they're bigger doesn't mean that they don't conform to the policy. The policy, as Mr. West pointed out to you, doesn't say shall be, it says should be. But in terms of the purpose of the policy, there's no doubt in my mind that it's to ensure that we don't start creating infill lots that are smaller than the other lots along that rural road. We aren't creating a smaller lot, we're creating a larger lot, which quite frankly is a good thing and not a bad thing. So it's certainly our opinion that the applications before you conform to policy 19, conform to policy 20. With respect to the minor variance, it may have been a recommendation or a condition of the severances back in 2005. We're now 16 years later. I don't see any reason why the committee should be bound by that decision. There's every right for our client to bring an application before the committee for consideration. And the committee has every right to consider the merits of that application. It's not the first time and it's not the last time that there will be planning applications that are not consistent with decisions that may have been made 10 or 15 years ago, either by the Committee of Adjustment, by the City of Ottawa, by the Ontario Municipal Board, or LPAT. There's no reason for the committee to be bound by a decision that was made in 2005. We would ask you to take those comments into consideration. It would ask you to approve the applications for severance, the application for severance and the application for minor variance. We'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Mr. Harrigan, you have further comments?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chown, for raising those excellent points. I just want to provide additional information towards that nature. The first one is in regards to policy 20. It very much is clearly done to make sure that there are certain limitations on severances, that there aren't an overabundance of severances occurring within the rural property. This wording is done very specifically to ensure that only lots that could meet certain size requirements as it existed on May 13, 2003 are permitted to be severed. You can have two properties that are both 7 hectares in size, and you can convey land over to one of them and permit severances, where the official plan clearly does not want or does not permit or intend for those properties to ever be severed. In regards to policy 19, the criteria C, again, the policy is using the word situated, which meant to mean located, placed on a certain road. It doesn't say frontage. It clearly does not use that frontage as it does with criteria B. It doesn't say visibility points or access points, which can be created fairly easily. It says situated, and it is situated on Manotick Station Road, as demonstrated by the image that Mr. West has showed. It faces that road there. It is closest to that front lot line. It has its address as Manotick Station Road. It is situated on Manotick Station Road. And regarding policy D, Mr. Chown is right that says it should be of a similar size, but it doesn't indicate that it's to prevent smaller lot sizes and therefore should permit bigger lot size. No, it's meant to be that it fits within the existing fabric of the built community. And having this severed lot as nearly triple the size of any other lot and having frontage more than double the size of any other lot around there is not of a similar size to that matter. And regarding the comments about the zoning bylaw, this is an active zoning bylaw that does apply to this property and wasn't implemented specifically to require a minimum lot size of 0.3 hectares. That is the intent of the zoning bylaw. A minor variance to go around that is blatantly not adhering to the general intent of that zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Harrigan.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask our conservation partners for their comments, please.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There are natural heritage features on this property. An EIS was completed and submitted to us for review And we do accept the findings and recommendations of the study. It basically requires the building envelope to be in the northwest corner of the property, the retained property, as created outside of the forested area with a buffer of about 4.5 meters to the trees. This is acceptable. So we have no further concerns. We just ask that that requirement be registered on title so that it's enforced for future development of that property. Secondly, we circulated to the OSSO and did not receive comments back. I don't believe there's a concern based on the size of the two lots being proposed here, but I did talk to our staff internally where we issue Part 8 building code permits in other parts outside of the city, other municipalities. And they recommended that we could suggest that a condition be added that requires just a written notice from the applicant that septic systems are a minimum of 3 meters from the new property line being created. So I just offer that as an option for the committee's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holland. Before I proceed to the panel for questions, Mr. West, are you happy with the conditions imposed by planning? Should we proceed with approving this application?
Yes, we're fine with the conditions.
And are you fine with the additional condition that Mr. Holland suggested with respect to the septic system?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that that's not necessary. That's a clear requirement under the building code. I don't think it needs to be imposed as a condition.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to move on to the panel, ask them for their questions, comments, or concerns. Mr. Lewis.
Some concerns, some not. As far as the lot size and the minor variance, I don't really have a problem with that. We're taking infill lots in the villages. I know it's the rural area, not the village, and splitting them in half and making small lots where there's big lots. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem when you look on the map, the lot, you look at the lot on the road, it fits in fine, suits me great. Where I do have a problem is if we're doing precedent setting with section 20 of the official plan. I'm not convinced that we're not going to end up with problems there. Somebody needs to convince me of that. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Otto, any questions or comments?
I have similar concerns to Mr. Lewis. And if we're going to do this, I think we should do it in a reserve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otto. Mr. Revort? You're muted.
I didn't really have any questions. I think, just as by way of some general comments, I think on policy 19C, and we're arguing about the word situated, I think it has to be a common sense application, and I think it's a very technical view of the wording of that official plan provision with respect to where the house is situated, because you're going to have these issues on corner lots. So it's, I'm not sure that, I think that's a very technical argument. I do have some concerns though with 19D as far as similar size in the existing spot zoning on the property. And I do have some concerns with respect to policy 20. And I would agree with Mr. Otto. I think I'd like to reserve on this as well and discuss it amongst us.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I ask the panel for where they would like to go, is there any further comments on behalf of the city, Mr. Harrigan?
One thing that I will just mention, thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to policy C about the situated in the corner lot line, it is the intended, the way that I have conveyed the information, that is the intent of the policy. And I know it has no bearing over this hearing, but that is something that has been corrected in the new official plan to say front yard now has to be on the same side of the road. So that is very much the intent of that policy, the way that I have described it, and it will be reflected in the new official plan. But I do recognize the new official plan has no bearing over this hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrigan. Any further comments, Mr. West or Mr. Chown? Mr. West.
I don't think so, Mr. Chair. I thank you for your time and ask you to take our comments into consideration.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel if they'd like to reserve this application, and for all, please raise your hands if you're in favor of reserving this application. Your application will be reserved. We'll be able to get back to you in due course. Thank you very much for your application, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And Madam Coordinator, will you send us a new meeting request?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Be checking your emails. I'll be sending the link now.
Thank you very much.